And I think the key thing for Tesla, and you probably won't hear it in the P&D report. You have to wait for the earnings call. Is just what's going on with the order inflow rate. So Elon stood up in front of that town or this all hands a couple days ago and proclaimed that the Model Y again will be the best selling car this year. So I mean, obviously that they have information on orders and how how their products are doing. And to make that kind of statement, you've got to have confidence, and that triggers them to order billions of dollars of material, and also to keep billions of dollars of capex lit up and labor coming in to build product. So I mean, they have a lot of information that just we don't have. I also think you're going to see some weirdness. It'll be interesting to see the production versus the sales numbers, because you're going to have this phenomena of them continuing to ramp and versus kind of like slowing down lines a little bit in the last couple of weeks. You're just going to see them continuing to build the Model Y. So, the Model Y is built in the last 2 weeks. Not a lot of them are going to make it to their final destination with transit time. So those will show up in inventory. So you could get this weird thing of starting the quarter in a stock out situation and ending the quarter where it looks like you have inventory, but you really don't. Those are all really going to land in the first couple of days or weeks in April. And but anyway, you're just going to see some weirdness in that. So I'll be looking forward to seeing that. A couple other companies have reported. I think Ford reported. I think they were down about 1.5% or so in sales year on year. And Mercedes, I think multiple regions of Mercedes reported, and they're down as well year on year. I don't think we have the U.S. number yet for Mercedes. I don't have the Stellantis numbers in front of me, but in general, there's some weakness. Now, if you look at the GM reported, I don't have the full GM number, but I know their EV numbers are higher because they didn't really build any EVs the prior year. But if you look, they shipped about 31,000 EVs. So these aren't big numbers. Tesla typically does about 170,000 in North America, and GM, with even a lot of inventory of cars, they did about 31,000. And what's interesting is half of those, their top two sellers are the Equinox and the Blazer EV. They're both made in Mexico. So tomorrow, when GM imports Equinox and Blazer EVs, they're going to be importing them and having to pay the 25%. And just so you know how that works, they're made at a facility in Mexico, GM facility, and then GM is the import. In this case, would be the importer of record. They'll bring it up into the U.S. and they've got to they're both the exporter and the importer, so they are ultimately dealing with the tariff. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to those product lines, because when a lot of these cars, their actual hardware margin is just most are negative. I should say most are negative. Many of the cars are negative ICE, hybrid, EV. Some make a decent amount, but it's just a few $1,000s is a great hardware margin on a car for them. And you take something like a 25% tariff and you put it on there, it literally vaporizes all the margin and then some. So anyway, if you look at the GM numbers, about half of that 31,000 in sales are made in Mexico, and they'll be under tariff starting Thursday. So anyway, it's a big deal. They'll have to start ordering cars. It'll be interesting if they start marking up. I think you're going to see some dealers just starting to immediately mark up, because from a cash perspective, they've got to already start ordering at the new price, any inventory backfills. So when they do that, they're going to be basically having cash exit their operation at the higher tariff price. So they may have to start taking on some of those price increases sooner, the dealer lots. So it'll be an interesting thing to watch. I think it'll layer in over time. And then the way the tariffs are going to work is it's finished goods starting Thursday, 25%, and then it's going to be components, automotive parts starting May 3rd. And the tariff isn't written very clear, so I think there are updates expected between now and May 3rd. Hopefully, those updates come in and they're finalized, very soon, because companies are literally sitting in conference rooms right now trying to figure out which product lines they move, which product lines they vaporize, which product lines they have to go into full redesign, they stop production. So, there's a lot of moving parts for them. So having a tariff that's properly written, I think the final assembly one is pretty clear. The auto parts one is not clear because it says some components. It uses the word key components. It says there may be carve outs for USMCA. They're not sure yet, and so I think the auto parts piece of it needs a lot of clarity. And that one is the killer because that one will start impacting products that are final assembled in the U.S. because they're doing a lot of sourcing from outside of the U.S. I would estimate, and there's some estimates out there. Right now the U.S. imports about 46% of the cars on the road today in the U.S. you see are imported. But if you do that's on a percent of vehicle basis. So if there's 16 million cars sold, roughly, 8 million of those are imported. But if you did it on a content basis, which is how tariffs are done and how tariffs are valued, some of the estimates I'm seeing, I totally believe it. That 50% number would be closer to 20 to 30% in terms of what's real U.S. content. So it's really, really, really dire for the U.S. auto industry. So I'm going to be interested to see what happens between now and May 3rd. I know that there's lobbyists, and through my channels and through other channels, I'm hearing that they're really trying to drive for carve outs on certain. Now they're going down to certain assembly types and saying, can this assembly type can be carved out? Can that be carved out? So that's going on right now with the federal government, and so we'll see what happens. But they're gonna have to trigger. First off, they have to build the box around, okay, what does the final vehicle tariff picture look like? And they have to make a set of decisions. And then in parallel, they have to kick off what does the full set on auto parts look like and what decisions do they make? So anyway, it's a very precarious situation. Tesla, again, on the final assembly side, Tesla is in the clear. Now, when you go to the auto parts side of it, Tesla does import auto parts. Okay, and the question is going to be is which one of those parts are covered under the USMCA exceptions? Because a lot of the parts that are not in the USMCA exception are very high labor content parts like engines and transmissions. So Tesla does not do those outside of the United States. So they're in a good spot. The part that I'm not clear on, I've actually seen some samples in front of me and I've seen pictures online, are the AI4 computers. From what I've seen assembled in Taiwan and I've seen assembled in Mexico. I haven't seen any that say assembled in the United States. Maybe that's changing over time, but that would obviously be probably one of the higher dollar items that Tesla may be importing. But it really drops off from there. So I think the relative and I wrote an article about this February 1st. The relative impact of Tesla is going to be very small. It's actually going to look like kind of a net price increase for everybody else, and Tesla is sitting there, with some potential need for a price increase, but relative to everyone else, they're going to be net lower. And then there's still, April 4th, the $7,500 credit is still live on 95% of what they sell in the United States. So, and then just finally, they're fairly insulated from retaliatory tariff attacks. You've seen some things happen in Canada, but in general, when you look at it on a continent and an economic zone basis, they are greater than 90% sourced in the EU, and they're greater than 95% sourced in Shanghai, and they would be cutting off their nose to spite their face to impact Tesla in those geographies. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I would say it's fairly unlikely. We'll see.
Jeff, thank you so much. I don't know if folks realize the level of information that Jeff just shared. There's so few people. He's probably the best out there that knows this incredibly well. Even Lars Morvey, the Tesla executive, appreciated and called out Jeff's by name So if you are listening to this podcast and you're not following Jeff Lutz, please do that right now. Click on his name, follow him. This is one of the top analysts that we have here. Great info. You also have, of course, Omar, Warren, and please follow Alexandra Mertz and Xander and the Cyberbulls. Do that if you haven't yet followed us. Thank you for that. Jeff, thank you.
Jeff,
Again, yeah.
I have a
You
quick
want-
follow-up for Jeff. So do they like tack on, is it a small number like 250 or $500 onto a price? And then the second thought was with the new non-launch series Model Y, did they just unveil a price that's slightly higher and we don't even know that it's higher?
Well, I don't. You say who's they? You say they're going to tack on a price increase.
Oh, well, Tesla, when they put price tags on the vehicles that we buy.
I mean, it's a good. I mean, I think the launch when Tesla does a launch series, I'm fairly certain that has nothing to do with tariffs. It's more to do with underutilized, slow line, highest cost, and build this product, take in all of these software features that Tesla basically sells for very high margins, and tack them on. So basically they can ramp at higher margins at lower speeds and get the product right. So that's why they're doing that. We don't know the pricing yet we know the pricing of the new Model Y in other regions. We don't know it yet in the US, but I mean right now Tesla has, very little reason to be doing any price changes at the product level. I think they'll need and want clarity at the components level. I think they can deal with the introduction of the Model Y. It is an interesting point. They could adjust price a little bit and kind of swallow up any even component tariff risk. They may decide to do that.
Okay. Any other questions on tariffs and all these legacy auto? They're the ones that's going to hurt the most. It sounds like it, and I think generally industry is understanding, recognizing that, and Tesla is less likely to be hurt by all this.
I will tell you this: there's a couple things for legacy. So they do have underutilized plants in the U.S., and you'll hear the UAW spokespeople say this. They're plants that are at 30-40% utilization. So it's not a question of like they need to build new factories per se. It's more of if they move the tooling that they have, from these sites that are out of the country to the U.S., do they have an economically viable path to move from $2 to $10 an hour rate labor in Mexico to $40 to $55 an hour labor in the U.S., or do they have to fundamentally transform how those operations are done or eliminate them? And that's the key. You know what I mean? Like if there's picture an engine, right? An engine assembly, or it could be GM, or it could be one of GM's suppliers, and you know they're down in Mexico for a reason. And what these decisions are made years ago on a program. Some of these engines are multiple years old, even older than the actual car model itself. So you can't make these changes over. So they designed a manufacturing process that's very high, that has very high labor. It's very labor intensive, and you can't just change it. Say I'm going to automate it overnight. You can't do that. You almost have to design a new product. Then you have to design the automation, and that's years in the making. That stuff you can't do overnight. So I think you're going to see a combination of some product lines going away, or some product lines are going to be on hold. Some they're going to try to sell in with a higher price and just see how they do in the market. And that's going to be dependent on the consumer. And we've seen with loan default rates, and we've seen with credit, we're seeing issues where the consumer is under a bit of stress. So anyway, I think we've hit this one in detail, unless there's other questions.
Yeah, thank you again, Joe. That was great info. Okay. Omar, are you there? Hoping Omar's there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yep. I want to ask you about your favorite guy, Trevor Milton, since we have you here. So Friday as well, President Donald Trump, he granted a full and unconditional pardon to Trevor Milton of Nikola Corporation Electric Trucks. At the time, he was committed or had fraud, right? Found guilty of multiple counts of fraud in December 2023. He was supposed to be serving 4 years of sentence in prison. Now he gets to walk off for free. And the reason I'm asking Omar is because Omar was directly involved with in that you interviewed Trevor Milton before this was all discovered, and you already kind of felt after that interview you felt that something was off as well. So curious, how did you feel about this this outcome here?
Well, Trevor Milton was somebody who basically stole money from the public essentially by defrauding investors. He claimed that he had this great hydrogen technology, and in some cases, for example, in the Hindenburg short report, the famous story was that they pretended they had a working hydrogen drivetrain when in reality they just pushed a truck down a hill and filmed it sideways so that it looked like it was driving when they didn't actually have a working truck. I mean, at one point, this company was worth more than General Motors. And this guy was absolutely guilty. So it seems like President Trump, in some of his comments, really had no idea who this guy was or what he did. He said he was treated very unfairly. They were just going after him because he liked Trump, which obviously is not true. So it was a little bit of a baffling decision. I think this was really a election with, two suboptimal choices, and no candidate is going to do everything you agree with. This personally, I said, this doesn't really seem right. Throw in the fact that, Trevor Milton's lawyer in this case was also the attorney general's brother. And this isn't a decision I agree with. But, at the end of the day, I guess he will be free. Hopefully, he won't defraud people again. But yeah, it's a disappointing decision. But what can you do? It seems like he was able to talk his way into a pardon somehow.
Wasn't it the nearly $1 million he contributed to Trump in the December of 2024 after Trump won the election?
Yeah, so he did donate several $1 million to Trump, and he's still a billionaire. He actually sold a lot of this stock. He bought the house that he owns. He paid the guy in Nikola stock. So if there was ever a fraudster, a guy who represents everything that Tesla Q said Elon was, it was Trevor Milton. And pardoning him is just a head scratcher, honestly. But um, what can you say?
Yeah, my point is it's not really a head scratcher. The reality is that both parties sell pardons. Biden sold pardons and Trump sold pardons. He sold pardons last time, he's selling pardons this time, and they're not very, in my opinion, ethical in how they do it. And it's one of the shitty things about American politics. And like Omar said, this is something we have to eat, unfortunately. But the reality is a lot of things that are happening right now, especially with Doge, are great. And you have to take some bad with the good.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think that buying pardons is something that we should accept. Somebody commits a crime, and just because they donated to you or something, you give them a pardon. That's ridiculous. So I'm not sure of any examples of, Biden doing it. I know there have been questionable pardons. Biden pardoned his son. But yeah, I think it's outrageous. I'm not dwelling on it too much. I'm excited about everything that's happening with Tesla. I'm excited about the rideshare service. the new Model Y. I think someone just gave the president bad information about what happened in this case, and he handed out a pardon, too freely without really looking into it. So that's going to be a little bit of an embarrassment for the administration. I would have hoped maybe even Elon could have filled him into the situation a little more. Maybe he wasn't part of those discussions. But, no president's going to do everything perfectly, certainly not this president. And, I think a lot of people disagree with it, but we'll have to see what happens after this. He could be subject to significant civil liability still, even though the restitution that he was supposed to pay to the victims has now, been canceled due to the pardon.
That's what he meant by he's going to out Elon.
I like that comment, Omar. Actually, that I don't know what the right word is, irony or something like that, where the Tesla Q were accusing Elon of, right, that it's a fraud, that he's just cooking the books, that it's the cars that he's making are just all hype and it's actually not true, is exactly what this guy did, Nicola. And that, it's just funny how people just attack Elon for that, and turns out that that's not even close to reality.
I think the funny thing is that the left hasn't picked up, the Trump haters haven't picked up on this. This isn't getting they're busy worrying about some MS-13 member who got deported without what they claim without due process. It's like, this is like the perfect one for you to criticize Trump on, and they're not grabbing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, because it's actually at odds with Elon, right? Like why would you do this? It seems like that's a story that showed that Elon is not as close to Trump, or not that he's not close,
I think these people have just forgotten about it. I don't think your average member of the public remembers who Trevor Milton is at this point. So I think they were able to kind of sneak it through for that reason. But it's disappointing. At the same time, he also went through hell. He's going to continue to go through, I think, a lot of litigation for this. I think he probably should have gone to prison, but I guess that's the sad state of America today, that if you're rich and powerful enough, even if you got that money from defrauding retail investors, you can weasel your way out of prison sometimes. But, maybe he'll go and do something productive for society. He does have some talents, I think. Maybe he'll be more productive and can redeem himself somehow if he's not in prison. Or more likely, maybe he'll try and defraud people again and end up in jail anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what happened.
Well, didn't he post that he's going to make some kind of documentary, the real story about how he was wronged and all that nonsense? Or was that an April Fool's joke?
I think that's real. Okay, well, let's talk stock. This Q1 is coming out. Do you guys think that's already built in, this understanding that the numbers, production deliveries can be really low? Is it already built in, or do you think that there's going to be a movement? I think that Omar, you actually posted that you think that the stock's going to go, it's going to go down, even if it goes up, even if they beat on deliveries, which they won't.
Well, I don't think I posted that. I don't know what the stock is going to do, and frankly, I don't care that much. But it does seem like you see Troy's number at around 355,000, and you see the analyst consensus at about 377,000. So maybe the analysts should be doing their jobs a little better, but I think there is a possibility of a delivery miss. I think people who are long this stock are not really hanging their hat on strong delivery growth, but given that we saw 386,000 deliveries last year, it is sort of concerning. And you had this narrative at the beginning of the quarter that, sales are collapsing 50%, 75% because Elon has just destroyed the brand so much. Everybody hates him. This business is going to be in free fall. And I think you're seeing a realization now coming into the third month of the quarter as they've ramped Model Y that sales are actually quite strong. There was a supply issue that was really much more prominent than the demand side issue, which is probably only, 5% or something like that, and not really 50% or 75% as some of the media kind of made it out to be. And you're seeing some of those numbers from China, from other markets as they ramp the Model Y. They're now going to be making non-launch series. They're going to be introducing the performance. They've got some more affordable vehicles that they want to start producing in the first half of the year, which really means this quarter. So I think when you're sort of seeing those weekly numbers come in and you're seeing that registration data come in, you're now getting data that isn't reading weakness and uncertainty, but you're actually starting to see some of the results of that ramp of the Model Y come in. And I think that's going to create a very different sort of backdrop. These sort of narratives of, demand has collapsed will be met with real numbers tomorrow. And I think the people are going to see that a lot of these concerns have been dramatized and overblown. They've got a really great new product here. I think it's going to drive growth. And we'll really start to get through that biggest hit we took in Q1, where all 4 factories were down, now that we're in the second quarter.
Well, hope you're right, but you know how powerful these news articles are. They can just write whatever they want. I mean, just this morning, JP Morgan wrote and said that there's a collapse in the numbers. It's going to be because of Europe, political of because of Elon and his politics, and they did not once mention the word Model Y and factory shutdown at all. And
look, I mean, we all know what they're going to write already,
yeah.
right? They're going to say sales have collapsed. Elon's running the country into the ground, company into the ground, blah blah blah, and the country. And that's a narrative that's going to catch on. There's a lot of people who want to read that. It's going to give them satisfaction. So they're going to write this, and some of it does carry over to the street. Institutional investors, retail investors, they're absolutely thinking about these concerns too. But when you hear them reaffirm that they're going to be launching their rideshare service in June, when you hear them reaffirm probably on the earnings call or maybe even announce what their plans are for the vehicle lineup, that I think is something that you can't really ignore as an investor. Even if deliveries are weak for whatever reason, trade, tariffs, demand, politics, whatever, you can't ignore a moment like Austin. And I think the people who are long this stock have a thesis that's much more centered around the AI side of the business than around vehicle deliveries.
Okay.
Well,
Hey, Xander, are you there?
yep, I'm here. Well said, Omar.
Yeah. So you're.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're pretty. You got the good finger in the pulse here. What's your guess of what's going to happen in the stock in the next several weeks as we head into 1 month from now is when they're going to actually do the announcement of the actual earnings call. 3 weeks from now, actually.
Yeah.
Whoa, things are moving fast. Yeah, 3 weeks from now, that's earning call. In the meantime, after the P&D drop tomorrow, what typically you're expecting to happen?
Yeah, I think Jeff touched on it. The algos will pick up these articles that we kind of all know that are coming. Something that gave me comfort to technically on the stock, if you open a weekly chart, you'll see a thing that we don't commonly see, which is it's called a bullish hammer. It's when the week starts, up high, goes down really far, and then comes back up and closes near where it started. And so you had that 2 weeks in a row, and then you also had that big bounce off of. Uh, 290, so you went from 220 to 210 in pre-market, to 290, which is, with all the noise that you had going around, cars getting firebombed and Elon's the worst thing. I think you've seen this other side of the market get activated from the Republican side, to where they're buying American and they're supporting it. So it seems to me like we would uh, kind of be range bound here between this 200 to 300, all the way into earnings. And me personally, not financial advice, I think that we have kind of this last moment, last quarter, before analysts will see some sort of data on how much robotaxi rides will be, and once that narrative takes hold, and then especially if you sprinkle in a lower cost vehicle announcement, um, then in my opinion, this to me is like the last hurrah. So I think this gets bought up. Bears would argue that this was a dead cat bounce, that you went to 290. I think that was, overshot. I think the Bears were trapped with that big push down, and now, over this next 3 weeks or so, you have bulls trapped who bought the 270, 290 spike, and so it'll kind of oscillate here. I think plus or minus in the 250s for a little bit, going into earnings, unless there's some kind of announcement that comes that, either good or bad, that pushes it out. But that's kind of like my feel on the technicals. I unlike Omar, I didn't buy a whole bunch of puts. I just bought one. But no, just kidding. Omar, did you actually do that? Or was that an April Fool's joke?
Well, it's partly an April Fool's joke to get people riled up, but I do actually have a friend's account that I help manage, and they have a large Tesla position that's, six-figure position. It's about 33% of their portfolio, and I did buy a couple of put contracts for them to hedge a little bit. And, I don't think it's wrong to trade options. You know, my problem with short sellers really that they short the company and then they lie, right? And they try and drive the stock price down. This creates a lot of confusion. But if you've got a large long position and you want to use puts to hedge it, I don't think there's anything evil about that personally.
People don't understand what it means to buy put. It allows you the right, but not the obligation, to sell your shares at a predetermined price. So, like if today you bought a 270 put, you paid something like $10 or whatever, and that gives you the right to sell your shares at let's say, the end of the week. If we drop to 240, you still have the right to sell your shares at 270, and it costs you $10 to do that. So it's important to understand that, buying a put is completely different than shorting the company, and but that's also, a money making thing. The bad part is really short and distort, and I think that's what Omar was trying to say, is when they lie about it, they take a position, and then they put out articles that are FUD.
Well, I mean, it is shorting the company, but you have, a situation where you could generate some cash. You could buy, sell calls, puts, and have more cash to buy shares. I mean, I think the really important investing philosophy for people is to not get sort of religious about it or say, oh, I can't, short Tesla stock, but just try and actually just do what's best for your portfolio. If you get into a situation where you're going to actually have cash coming in on down days because of other investments or options or whatever, then that actually can give you a better position to be a long investor as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to predict the daily action. I think Omar said it well. If you're longer than a few months, in the stock in terms of your time horizon, you have to be thinking ahead to autonomy and humanoid robots over the next year. And if you want to back that up and you say, well, yeah, well, I'm kind of interested in what's going to happen in terms of how people are going to buy cars. Again, if you look at the U.S. market, three of the top 10 EVs sold in the U.S. market are Teslas. In fact, they're like 1 through four. Three of the top four are Teslas, with the Cybertruck now. The other three are Model Y-like competitors made in Mexico, where their profits vaporize, in a couple of days. So it's not like they're going to sell zero in the second quarter, but they have a fundamental problem on their hands for the next three, those three top non-Tesla vehicles in the top 10 EVs sold. There's a problem. Now, is this a lot of units? No, this is probably, if those products do vaporize, it could be another 10 points or so of market share for Tesla. But there's definitely a competitive breadth issue, not only with EV, but with non-EVs as well. There's a lot of non-EV. Remember, hybrids are fundamentally inefficient vehicles to build. They've got two powertrains. This is not a long-term thing that vehicle manufacturers want to do. It is this short-term thing they've thrust into the market because they can get decent margins because they don't know how to get decent margins on EVs. So they've created this narrative with hybrids. It works for now. It's not something they want to do over the next 5 to 10 years. But you don't even need tariffs to last that long. So the point is there's going to be either demand destruction or a significant competitive advantage for Tesla. There's either you're gonna have brand destruction in the overall number for autos this year, especially if you have a recession, by the way. But if you don't, you've got a pricing advantage that's now formed with Tesla. They may have to get less promotional. By the way, it really all depends on macro. Why would you have to be so promotional if the Mach-E or if the other vehicles around you aren't there for sale? Some could argue that there's pressure on the consumer, but anyway, just if your short-term view is around vehicles, that competitive landscape just got better. There's no other way to describe it. They still have the tax credit, and other people's vehicles relative to them will either not exist or it will be precipitously more expensive than they were a few weeks ago. So anyway, it's just an interesting thing to keep in mind. If Tesla puts one line in the P&D report tomorrow that says, something along the lines of, we were supply constrained in the quarter, or something, one line about their order inflow rate being strong or being on par with, where they expected it to be. I think that would also help deal with the narrative. But that's ultimately to bust this narrative, because people aren't responding to logic anymore because you just have FUD, you have all this stuff out there. But I mean, at least around 100,000 Model Ys physically had to come out of the build plan in Q1 to do this transition. That's just the physics based on how long this product transition took, what they said in the earnings transcript, and what we're seeing in terms of vehicle inventories in January and February. There's no other explanation. And as those inventories returned in March, so did the sales. But you notice you're not seeing the electric articles. You're not seeing articles from Rolling Stone or other companies talking about the jump in sales, not only relative to the prior few months in this quarter, but even relative to last year in March, the jump in sales in these concerning areas in Europe, for example, and in China. The relative strength. No, there's no articles about it. So, just be ready for what's happening tomorrow. But there's something for everybody, is my point. If you have a long-term view, Tesla's reaffirmed all of that. Of course, there's execution risk in it. Nobody's ever done an unsupervised computer vision driving system, that's global, that works globally. So of course there's going to be execution risk. Humanoid robots, nobody's done these at scale. Nobody has done them with the proper AI brain. Nobody knows the unit economics on these things yet. So of course there's execution risk, but there's kind of something for everybody. But the auto position that everybody's been lamenting for the last however period of time, at least in the US, which is, a big portion of their market, has gotten competitively better. And we've got reaffirmation in China, and we have March data points in Europe that says its strength is returning.
Hey, Jeff, can you comment on, one of the big news, I guess, that happened this week was the Model Y is near production back to where it was before. If at least we know that's happening in China, we know that the Berlin and the other factories are probably fairly close within weeks of getting there as well. What does that mean for the new affordable vehicles?
Well, I think it's questionable in the U.S. if it's bad. If the new Model Y was in full supply, it would have been for sale. I don't have another logical reason to not. They're not trying to get every single old Model Y out of the system. Like if there's 5 or 10, it doesn't make a big deal. So I don't know why the new Model Y, except for the launch edition, is not available for sale. That tells me that there could be some sort of constriction on supply that we're just not aware of. So be prepared for that surprise, unless someone else has a more logical explanation. But yeah, what you want to do to build the new, more affordable vehicles on the same lines, you want the Model Y fully re-ramped and running, and then you would want to take any available utilization that's available, because remember, their capacity is not running at full utilization, nor do you ever want to run. By the way, full utilization, by the way, for people in manufacturing is, 80-85% utilization. That's a nice, safe, and healthy level. They're not running, like, especially in Texas and in Berlin. So what you would want to do is you'd want the new Model Y to be stabilized. You want it to be completely ramped, and then you'd want to take the rest of that absorption and you'd want to start building. I think they're putting in extra capacity in those lines for these new affordable vehicles. And then you'd want those to ramp up. And with all 3 or 4 of those running together, the fixed cost absorption per vehicle built should come down. And that's how you're going to make new affordable vehicles, by the way. There's going to be COGS reductions that Tesla can do that don't affect the consumers at all. And one of them is going to be greater fixed cost absorption because of the larger volumes, which means when they absorb, when you have more units and more fixed costs are absorbed, they have to put less of that into the COGS, which means they can either get more gross margin or lower the price of the vehicle. And the other thing you're going to see is you're going to see them using models from the next generation vehicle that are designed at lower price points. Like they designed a motor electric motor that's under $1,000 to build. The prior versions were $1,200 to $1,800 or more to build. And so yeah, I mean, so you're gonna have but the consumer is not going to see or experience an issue with that. It's just going to be something that's in there that's a lower cost to build. So yeah, it's the connection between the new Model Y and the upcoming more affordable vehicles is important.
Okay. Well, thank you guys. Thank you very much, Jeff. Sorry, Xander, do you have one more thing you want to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna say one last thing. I realized I didn't explain what that bullish hammer means, and not financial advice. This is what I did. To me, I kind of saw the supply of shares that were purchased between those like 140s and 220 area, which was all the pre-Trump winning trade. So personally, I bought some shares in at 223. Had my dad buy some. My wife bought some. So that to me is kind of like the floor of where. I see it now. It could be wrong, so that's why it's not financial advice. But I don't have this big fear to answer your original question. Like, is it priced in? I think yes. All this negative stuff is already priced in. So I'm very optimistic that you can have just a complete surprise and the market reacts in a way that you don't expect, which is usually what happens. So.
Exactly. We do usually surprise you. Thank you again. Thanks everybody. Appreciate you guys so much. We got the best of the best here. You got Jeff Lutz, Omar, Warren, Alexandra, and Xander, and then Tesla Yoda and others. But please follow Cyberpulse and join us again next week. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye, everyone.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.